wonderful to be here with you again. Today, Professor Chacon and I have as guests two wonderful individuals who are making a tremendous impact on our community. From the Paso del Norte Center of Hope, Raquel Rodriguez and April Tena. Our topic in part one was human trafficking, and this is part two of our conversation. It's sometimes difficult in a certain time frame to be able to encapsulate all of the important details of this topic. So we went ahead and taped a part two. And so I hope that the information is informative. And at the end of the podcast, there will be some details in relation to hotlines and more information. So thank you for viewing again. What would be the process? Center of Hope gets notified that there's an individual that needs assistance. Can you walk us through sort of the process?
Yeah, definitely. So whenever we receive a referral or a cry out, it kind of depends on their age, their situation. From there, we will go ahead and reach out. Again, it really varies depending on their age, if it's at school, if it's the parents, or if they're in jail at the moment. And so we'll get taken in the information. We'll go ahead and do an assessment. And so what that assessment looks like, okay, is there exploitation going on, or are they just at really high risk? So in my case, I work with I work with youth. So normally around the age of 12 to 13 to 22 or 21. And so I go ahead and assess, okay, are they just really high risk? Or do they run away a lot? Do they have a lot of history of abuse? And so even if they're high risk, we'll go ahead and take them and we'll try to cover and try to minimize some of those high risk. So if there's a lot of running away, we'll look into ways that they can find a safe place where they don't have to run away, even though home is not the best. Again, if we do have survivors, that would look a little bit differently. Youth between adults looks very different, just because when we have youth, we're dealing with not only them, we're dealing with their parents, we're dealing with the system, versus adults, they have the free will to make those choices. And so I work a lot with not only the youth, but the parent. And so if the youth is struggling with anger, or is just having a hard time staying at home, then we'll figure out a way or send a referral so they can get counseling. So it really, our clients, just as much as they have different vulnerabilities, once we are working with them, they have different needs. And so we have some that just need housing or food or a place to stay tonight, where we have others that need social gathering or counseling or a way to let out stress. So again, our job and our days look very different based on every client's need. So we couldn't exactly say, oh, okay, they only need this, because again, every client is different, so every day looks different.
Yeah, there's not a one size fits all. I mean, It could vary minute by minute, individual by individual. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's important. Claudia?
This is my question. What percentage of the people that we meet outside, out on the streets, at the store, would you say are victims of human trafficking?
That's interesting, because the statistics are so difficult, but I've heard it, the way I've heard it described is that you will meet 2 victims of human trafficking in your lifetime. Probably you, Ms. Claudia, will probably meet more in the line of work with your first responder than the average person. But yeah, I've heard it said that you will probably meet 2 victims of human trafficking in your lifetime. And that could be anywhere from, working at a school, working at a hospital, working at a clinic, getting your nails done. It just depends. They're out there, in daylight, and, we come across them, we work with them. Sometimes we, see them at school. They may be domestics, they be nannies working, to take care of your kids. Maybe someone doing your nails, your hair. So it's interesting, but statistics, it's difficult. But the best way I could describe it would be 2 in your lifetime.
Okay, because now, before my first responder life, I remember when they had done the federal agencies had done a crackdown on the buffet companies. And I remember going there as a kid with my parents, and, being served by teenagers. I mean, of course, they were older than I was. So when you're a child, you see everybody as way older. But if I go back and I recall, they're probably, what would you say, early 20s, maybe late teens, as servers. And I mean, my mom would always say, look, they work so hard, but I never had that common sense that I have now, and say, to think that they had been forced into labor.
Sure, yes.
I saw a report on TV how they were doing a crackdown on these companies, and then little by little it began to trickle down. I'm sure you're right that I probably bump into them more as a first responder than before, because of the calls that we make. Still, I mean, it makes me wonder how many people, if I go to Walmart and run an errand, or I go to the gas station, or I go for a jog, and sometimes I see people working out on this, working in construction. I mean, the fields were known to do that for many, many years. The farm workers are these people in agriculture are people that really we don't speak about, and it makes me wonder how many of these people are actually being forced to work.
You're absolutely right. And a lot of times because of the culture, they say, we start working very young. Our parents did it. So, they expect it. It's just an amazing work ethic that's been, instilled in us. But when it looks like, you can't go to school, or you're waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and you go to school, and then you get off of school and you still have to go back and work, and you're forced to do it. You have someone maybe controlling you. Now, if they take your work permit, anything like that, that's labor trafficking. So you're absolutely right. It's that balance. It's some people say, no, it's just, I had to do it when I was young. I worked alongside my father, so my child has to do the same thing. So okay, I understand, but yeah, if you're forcing your child to do it, they're very young, if they're not going to school, if they're not getting paid, then that is labor trafficking.
What percentage of these victims would you say are not children? They're adults.
That's a very difficult question, just because the population we work with, they don't self-identify, meaning that they don't call themselves, they don't say I'm a trafficked person. And so again, because it's so, it's not very seen, right? We walk by these people, we don't see that they're trafficked. It's hard to catch those numbers when you're not able to see it. So it's very difficult to be able to give a specific statistic. But I know as far as in our shelter, we have a combination of both youth and adults. So I wouldn't say we have more youth than we do have adults. I do think that it's the way that we get referrals and the way we end up working with them does look very different. With youth, it's either at the schools or at the juvenile detention center. With adults, we have them at the drop-in center. We have the human trafficking hotline, different areas, but I wouldn't necessarily say, I don't know, what do you think about that?
I don't know about a percentage.
Yeah.
We're working with adults right now, do you know?
I want to say we have one case manager that's working with, I want to say 13 adults. And then I myself am working with 10 youth. And then we have another case manager that's working with 10 youth. Mm-hmm. So again, it's very difficult to give a statistics as far as numbers go, because again, it's very hard to catch it.
Mm-hmm. So normally when we're asked about statistics and it's so difficult, we just pretty much say, well, this is how many we're working with right now, presently as of today. And then, so that's the number that April just gave you. But unfortunately, statistics are difficult to come by.
And then the number is definitely higher, because we have this amount of numbers, people or youth and adults don't always accept the services as well. So the numbers are definitely higher. It's just that these are the individuals that say, hey, yes, I do want those services.
How do you have access to the adults? I missed that. Sorry.
So with the adults, the way we get referrals is we either get them from the drop-in center, so any of the homeless shelters. We get them from, where else do you get them from?
Different our partners, different agencies in the community, Center for Children, different attorneys.
The hotline, the human trafficking hotline. So again, with adults, I think it varies a little bit more. We've had counselors reach out to us, just different partners, as Raquel said. But as far as youth goes, it tends to be more with the school or the JPD.
Okay. The other thing that Dr. Archuleta did mention was that, and you had mentioned this in Professor Nevada's presentation, that one of the key, what could it be, factors, denominators, was not necessarily that El Paso was a border, it's the I-10, right?
Yeah, correct. A lot of times we hear, oh, you know what, human trafficking doesn't happen in El Paso, or when it does, it's because of Mexico. Right. It kind of spills over into El Paso, and those are the only victims of trafficking. They don't realize that the majority of the survivors we've worked with are U.S. citizens. I would say between the ages of 16 to 24, something like that. I-10 plays such a big role because it goes so far east and west. You can come in from California, from Phoenix, and stop in El Paso and post an ad. So many times the buying and selling of people is online. It looks, there's a few years ago, it was Backpage.com, which was one of the biggest websites to sell people on. And it looks similar to Craigslist, the selling part. And, many times these traffickers create an ad, post a picture and a description of the person that they're selling. So they may stop in El Paso, post an ad, stay a day or two, it just depends, and then move on, all the way down to Florida. So that's probably, I'd say, in my opinion, or Center of Hope, that I think that's more of a factor than us being a border town. A lot of times, again, they say, oh, it's Mexico. It comes from Mexico. This isn't happening, in El Paso.
I think another factor that does play into that is our military base. Just because we have that there, the demand is a little bit higher. So the I-10 and then the military base, they both play factors into the human trafficking that occurs here.
What's interesting here to add on to what you just mentioned is that every so often when we get calls from I-10, on I-10, our eyebrows kind of raise because sometimes we get, for most part, what I've seen are younger women. Oh, I was going to a friend's and they got in some accident. Oh, it's because I was going to some friends. Okay, ma'am, so where are you from? Well, I'm from Las Cruces, but I'm from El Paso, but I'm driving to Albuquerque. So their stories don't sound right, but you know what they do? They tend to stick to the interstate. So, of course, you have PD there, or for most part, sometimes it's PD, sometimes it's sheriffs. So we check that they're medically right, and most of the time they tend to, any medical help, they tend to just waive it. No, we don't want anything, because they try to remain so low key. Sometimes when they're traveling with somebody, they'll say, oh no, it's my dad's friend, and normally it's younger women with an older man, and you're like, oh no, it's my dad's friend, or it's my older friend. And okay, so then we're thinking, finally we get back in the trucks, we're like, well, that doesn't sound right, And so, I'm sorry?
Oh no, and they will have a script, right? They'll say, it's a very well rehearsed script. It's an explanation for everything. We're going from here to there. It's my uncle, a friend. It's a very well rehearsed script. So.
And they tend to have the same story. Mm-hmm. Different women, same story. And they all tend to stick to the interstate. They go back and forth. The only reason, like I said, that we're there is because something happened. Mm-hmm. Either they got in an accident. Every so often we'll show up, if somebody calls for a medical call here or near the hotels or the motels, sometimes you see women panicking. You're like, oh no, it's just that I've had problems. And then you see somebody in the background like acting extremely shady. Mm-hmm. And so that's when it becomes a PD matter for most part. But it's very interesting how you're right, they all have the same script. Same script, different types of young women, Same script. Interesting. There was a mention of the dark web. Do you think you could go a little bit into detail how that influences with human trafficking?
Just like Backpage.com, I refer to it because, like I said, it was $1 billion. It's, human trafficking is $1 billion industry. Therefore, this third party Backpage.com, it was very similar to Craigslist. And like I said, what they would do is they were like a third party. They didn't want to take responsibility for the buying and selling of people. They were saying, like, we have this web page and we're not responsible for what they post, but then they would charge for these ads. So, once they shut Backpage down, of course, just like anything else, 3 or 4 more pop up. And this is where just not only, human trafficking, but gun smuggling, other different, shady organizations or shady, illegal activities can happen. But like I said, the buying and selling many times of individuals is on these websites.
How did you both get into this line of work? I mean, I think that's always, a story within itself, a podcast within itself. But how did you, Raquel, get into working on human trafficking? And of course, the same question to April.
It's quite by accident. At the time, the interim executive director for Center of Hope was Cynthia Horton. She's an amazing woman. I just happened to meet, and we struck up a conversation, and we just started talking. And she says, you like to talk a lot, and I said, yes, I do. And she said, you'd be perfect for this outreach position, and give me a call. And she told me it's Paso Norte Center of Hope. So I went back, looked it up. Didn't know. I had no idea what human trafficking was. Didn't know that this affected our community. Didn't know, I had, at the time, my kids were in middle school and high school, and didn't know this existed. So when I spoke to her again about the position, as a mom, as just a woman, just as a human being, I thought, no, definitely, if I want in, I definitely want in, and if I can do my part, whatever that looks like, I want to spread awareness. I want to be able to support anyone, my coworkers, the schools, the community. You want to get this information out there because there's so many misconceptions, and there's so many survivors, victims that we're missing, that we're not reaching. So this is why, it's so important, and we're so passionate, and this is why we're so appreciative to you all for allowing us to come on and spread the awareness and what that looks like, and how parents can talk to their kids. Because if parents, and if this isn't being talked about, yes, I understand it's a touchy subject, but if this isn't being talked about, there's predators out there that will take the time to groom our kids. They're all our kids. This is our community. So, it's just happened so by accident. That was about 5 years ago. And I've had the pleasure of watching it grow, and working with the schools, how the schools have come aboard, how so many other agencies we've partnered with, JPD, Big Brothers Big Sisters, to offer mentorship to our survivors. So it's exciting, how far we've come, and it's even more exciting to see how far we'll continue.
No, I know they're happy to have you. I mean, you illuminate so many things, and I can just, feel, like you said, the passion that you have, and the urgency in terms of this is needed like yesterday. So no, I appreciate that. April, how did you, as we wind down, how did you get into this line of work?
Well, so it was the opposite of hers. It was very intentional. So a couple years ago, I want to say about 5 years, I was going to school in Dallas, and we had a presenter, and they kind of talked about what human trafficking was and the line of work that they were doing. And I was very much interested in it. And so I got involved in their volunteer program. And this was in Dallas. And so what they used to do is that they used to go at night. They used to drive around hotels. And so when these hotels were like ghetto kind of old hotels, they would get the license plates of really nice cars, because it didn't make sense to have a really fancy, like brand new car at these old hotels. And so we would send this information to law enforcement. And so that's how we kind of helped and helped the society in that area. We would also deliver soaps, bar soaps, that had the hotline trafficking on there. So if any survivor ever decided, you know what, I want to get out of that life, they would have that Paso. So I had no interaction with survivors whatsoever. I moved back to El Paso after I finished and I graduated. And I was thinking, how am I going to do this here in El Paso? There's nothing here. And so I Googled and I was like, human trafficking volunteer work. And I found Paso del Norte. But then I was like, no, there's no way. I'm just not going to even bother. So I didn't even bother trying to volunteer. Maybe I want to say a couple months later, there was this, what were they doing? It was like a church event. And so they were talking about specific things, homelessness, human trafficking. And so there, I ended up going to meet the director of Paso del Norte at that Center of Hope, and that was Alki Cummings. And so I got to talk to her and kind of told her how, you know, I have a passion to serve people, to serve this population. And so she offered me the position for the CYD coordinator. And so at that time, I was actually doing more prevention work. I graduated with my bachelor's in social work, and then I transitioned into case manager. So it took me some time before I actually got to work with survivors, but I'm also very grateful that I got the time to grow and to learn about human trafficking before I worked with survivors. Because very often we have people that they hear about human trafficking and they want to save the client and they want to be the superhero. And as I got the time to kind of learn about it before even working with clients, it taught me that they're the heroes. They're the people that I look up to. They're the ones that I want to be able to serve. And so it's been really amazing to be able to work with these youth and these young adults and see how resilient they are and their capability. And again, a lot of our clients, they look, from the outside world, they look like they have prostitution charges or they're just a bad kid. But when you take the time to look at them and get to know them, you're astonished and you're changed by who they are, and they change you. And so it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to do this. And thank you again for allowing us to be able to talk with you guys and to spread the word, because it really does need to be out there.
No, it's really, I mean, I appreciate that. And you know, it's an honor to speak with you. One of the things that you mentioned, Raquel, is the Mary Gonzalez's bill and the impact of that bill. And you know, the implications of that bill. I think it has I mean, so much in terms of what it has to offer. And I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about our Representative Gonzalez's bill and the impact that it's had.
That is huge. She is amazing, and I'm so proud to say, you know, I'm from El Paso. When we speak of Representative Mary Gonzalez, it was very, very difficult to get into to talk to schools or, you know, about human trafficking. It is such a touchy subject, and we are always mindful. And when we go in and work with students of all ages, you know, we present age-appropriate material. So when we would approach a school about, you know, hey, let us get in there to talk to your parents, your kids, your staff, you know, they were leery. So House Bill 111 states that every school employee must be trained in to identify and how to report victim of human trafficking. So, you know, it's been so amazing to see these schools like jump on and say, you know, how do, you know, and after the training, it's like, okay, how do we support our students? How do we support our families? They'll begin to ask us for resources. I mean, and our case managers are so amazing, because if we have an outcry, if I'm presenting at a school and there's an outcry, there was one school where we had 4 different outcries. None of them were human trafficking, yet there were different outcries. We still called in our case manager, and she was able to, working closely with the counselor, you know, give parents and families different resources in the community that they weren't aware of that can help them. So the schools are absolutely stepping up, and, you know, it starts with training their staff, and then it's like, okay, and part of it's like, what kind of curricula do you have for our students? You know, how do we keep them safe? What can we do? You know, and then of course, in turn, it's like, you know, talk to our parents. And, you know, we have some pretty amazing parents that will get on and say, you know, I'm going to make it my mission, or how do we help? But, you know, before we end this, I want to give a huge shout out to our students, because, you know, January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And this is where our students come together and they will do drives for us. Montwood High School, their cosmetology department, every year would have an event at their school, and they would raise money for us. Burgess High School one year did a product for prom. They, I think you would get $5 off your prom ticket if you donated something off our wish list. So the schools, the students, they take it on this project and they say, how can we help? How can we help our community? And just like that one student who called and said, my peer, is talking a lot of smack, and I think you all need to come talk to her. Our kids are listening.
Yes.
And that is huge. So, big shout out to our schools because they're stepping up, and absolutely the phenomenal Representative Mary Gonzalez, who is just pushed us, just came up and gave us that boost.
Professor Chacon and I would like to personally thank Ms. Rodriguez and Ms. Tena for coming on to the show today. We're talking to both of you about human trafficking and the impact that Paso del Norte Center of Hope has had on this issue. So again, on behalf of EPCC Talks, I'd like to thank you for coming onto the show. The information that you shared was not only relevant, but really crucial to this community. And at the end of this podcast, we'll have some important details as it relates to numbers and or information where individuals can reach out to either the Human Trafficking Hotline and or Center of Hope. So thank you again on behalf of EPCC Talks.